Imagine a scene. A group of friends is taking a hike along a stream. Suddenly, the peace of nature is disrupted by the cries of an infant. Frantically, the group searches and realizes the baby is floating down the rushing river. Splashing into the water, the group forms a chain, takes hold of the baby, and with no little effort, brings the child safe to shore. But no sooner are they on the bank than another infant screams from the rapids. Back in the water they go, the second child brought to safety. Then there comes another, and another, and another. Exhausted, the group keeps diving back in the water until one of them takes off running. "Where are you going?" someone yells. "I'm going upstream. We need to stop these babies from falling in the river."
This is Season 2, Episode 1 of the Smart Justice Podcast, Going Upstream.
Crime and punishment are hot topics. Are there solutions different than what we're hearing about at a national level?
They're trying to stop that cycle so that we don't see their children, they don't see them in juvenile court, we don't see them headed to circuit court.
We give someone a traffic ticket and they're scared, they can't pay that ticket, and what do? They don't show up for court. They think it's going to go away. Well, it doesn't go away.
It's not about the court bringing in that money, it's about helping that person avoid this kind of problem in the future.
There is a different way to approach justice that has better return on investment.
The bad people need to be in jail and stay there. Folks that are suffering from just social ills, they don't need to be here.
That seems to strengthen both law enforcement and courts and tie that together with community resources.
I think that's what makes it worthwhile, that little bit of extra time you spend working on it. But if you can't do a little mercy when you're here, then it's not worth being here.
And then track the impact to communities and better outcomes. And we're calling this approach Smart Justice.
Smart Justice is a work of Restore Hope and partner organizations. Restore Hope is a software and services organization that helps communities achieve better outcomes for justice and child welfare efforts. Smart Justice is focused on optimizing the system by improving the relationships among its parts.
Welcome to the second season of the Smart Justice Podcast. In this season, we're going to be moving upstream to see if there are ways that we can engage people and divert the probable slide into incarceration and foster care and other situations that are so complex that their outcomes are not good, of putting their family back together and getting onto career paths and independence. And so in Season 2, we're going to focus on the opportunity that we have to engage individuals in district courts. To help us understand the justice system around courts, I'm joined by really an Arkansas legend, Betty Dickey. Betty, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to be here.
So Betty, let's just walk a little bit through kind of your history. I understand that you were a prosecutor. You started your work in courts as a prosecutor?
I did. Actually, I started as a teacher, and then I worked as one of the city attorneys in Pine Bluff, the city attorney at Redfield, and then on to be the first elected prosecuting attorney in the state. And in Levin West, which is Pine Bluff, it's Jefferson and Lincoln counties.
When was this?
It was in 1994.
In 94. And so the 90s saw a sharp rise in crime, violent crime across the nation, and definitely here in central Arkansas. That's about the time that, banging in the rock happened with the gang problems. Yes. Here. Was that similar in Pine Bluff?
Yes, and actually we were having more homicides the first year that I was in office than Little Rock was. And it was a challenging time. I served as prosecuting attorney for 2 years and then went to work in the state in different areas. The Public Service Commission, I was the governor's chief counsel, and then the governor appointed me twice to be on first as the chief justice and then as an associate justice on the Supreme Court.
Understanding is you were not only the first female prosecuting attorney, but also the first female Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Arkansas.
Yes, and the first chief of staff for the governor, first woman. It was, and I didn't realize some of those times when I ran that no other woman had tried. So it was an interesting time.
Well, thanks so much for
Thank you.
lending your wisdom and experience to this conversation here. Before we talk about district court, can you kind of give us an education on how the court systems work with the legislature and the executive branch?
Well, just as nationally, on a state level, there are three branches of government, the executive, judicial, and legislative. And I'm sure you're familiar with those different circumstances, but these courts all work under the judicial system. The state Supreme Court, the state Court of Appeals, the state circuit courts, and the district courts, which when I was practicing were called municipal courts, and city courts. It's so that's the different areas, but it's the district court I think that you're interested in talking about.
We, kind of through our work, what we're making a kind of claim here is that in these misdemeanor courts, these district courts, we can find individuals who are in trouble and need of engagement, and if properly done, could help divert them from what looks likely to be a slide into maybe circuit courts and into felony prosecution and child welfare cases for them.
Yes, if you look at diversion instead of just how hard the punishment's going to be, then you give them an opportunity to fix the problems that they have while they're still small. Same way with teenagers. If you can handle it at home or in schools, then the courts don't have to try to start dealing with those problems.
In your experience or any statistics that you've looked at, is there typically kind of a progression of severities of crimes that individuals, I'd say on average, commit?
Well, there is a progression. When I was doing the misdemeanor prosecutions from district court, municipal court, the juvenile court, some of the kids, 10, 12 years old, had rap sheets as long as your arms. You think, how did it get to be this bad, this soon? But you have parents that are doing drugs and grandmother's taking care of them, and schools can't handle it. So they go into the system, early.
Yeah, I think you are familiar with some of the judges that are running community diversion programs all the way up to kind of fully sanctioned alternative courts in misdemeanor courts, like a DUI court. Can you just share your thoughts on, the opportunity that's there to do that kind of diversion?
Well, more and more courts, and very few were doing that at the time I served, are using things like diversion as far as alcohol or drug treatment to, reduce the problems or to fix the problems while they're still fixable without not just jail time but without prison time, which destroys the family unit, and particularly is hard for children.
One district court offering alternatives is in Van Buren, Arkansas, where Judge Charles Baker seeks to find options to give people an off-ramp.
Well, we've always had a philosophy here that we not only want to take care of whatever problem someone has in court immediately, we want to have a situation where they don't have to come back to court, either about that particular case or about a case in the future. And so sometimes the easier solution would be just to put somebody in jail and say, well, we've closed this case, we can mark it off our books, but that doesn't help them prevent future occurrences where they end up back in the court system. And so when I first took the bench, we decided that we were going to try some innovative things to see if we could provide some alternatives to people that would help them with their employment situations, help them financially, help their family, if there were either mental health issues, substance abuse issues, just try to be a one-stop source for people to get help no matter what their situation. And so from a judge's perspective, what that meant to me immediately was that I can't look to jail as a first alternative. I can't assess fines in every situation and expect that someone who's unemployed or underemployed or someone who's not able to buy groceries for their family is going to be able to pay a fine in my court. And so we initially got together with our county adult education program and we said we want to try to find some solutions so that people can position themselves better in the future so they don't end up back in court.
In some cases, courts specialize in able to offer specific help to people looking for an alternative to fines or jail time. Judge Wendy Sherman Ford Smith oversees just such a court.
I run the DWI court, and we had just had approval for our DWI court. So I began running that January 1st of 2021. When we now have a probation officer, so when we see people who have a DWI 2 or higher, and sometimes a DWI 1, but we won't get into that right now, we have them talk to the probation officer. And then we can also have public defenders or defense attorneys who refer people for DWI court. And then they're assessed if they meet the qualifications and the prosecutors approve them.
Okay. And so how does the court actually operate?
We are a 5-phase court, and right now it's taking people between 13 to 16 months to complete. It can actually go over if they need to, because by the time they've bought in and they're that close to graduation, they don't mind going over whatever time period we've got. I haven't had anybody complete within 1 year, although I'm hoping that might happen. It's a 5-phase program. It's intensive, and they have a lot of things that they have to do. They have to report, they have to have stable housing, they have to have a stable job. We start to repair relationships. We refer them to be assessed through adult education. They have to report into the probation officer. They have therapy sessions, group meetings. So there's a lot that they have to do.
Well, what's their motivation?
It usually begins with getting out of jail time. That can be usually around 14 days for a DWI 2 and 90 days for a DWI 3. But once they buy into the program, then it's about protecting those sobriety days. They're seeing that their life is changing, and they're putting relationships back in place. They're doing better in their jobs. They're feeling better physically, and so they start to buy in, and it becomes about something other than that. So we're okay if they say, I just want to avoid the jail time, I want to do this court. Mm-hmm. Because we always see it turn around. I haven't had a graduate who's come through yet that hasn't had their life changed.
There seem to be two competing ideas on the national level around criminal justice reform. And one seems to be we need to understand and engage people to try to take care of the underlying problems. But they tend to be pretty negative against law enforcement in the courts, and the other side tends to be very tough on long sentences and quick action against criminals, so bad behavior. And I think what we're proposing is something that's down the middle. Is this diversion is not soft on crime or hard on crime. It addresses bad behavior, but gives opportunities to individuals to make corrective action. Oh, there's always an out. What would you say? Because I don't think anyone could ever charge you with ever being soft on crime.
Exactly. And yet, with the years of being a prosecutor and a judge, and then more recently having an opportunity to go into the prisons and teach classes, you see that there are some people in prison that are nicer than I deal with on that in the free world, and you think they show remorse. They've done things for rehabilitation to be able to get a job if and when they get out of prison, and are working toward restorative justice, being able to live again in the free world and be contributing members, and you see some of those when you go in and teach in this, and other justices, Bob Brown has taught in the prison, and you see that these people, if given an opportunity, would have never come here, but given an opportunity, they to find a job, do some of their sentence, take Pell Grants, and live a life that entitles them to be free. You see some of that.
Judge Sherry Cap of the district courts in Franklin and Johnson counties offer opportunities for people to take those different paths.
So in January of 2021, we began the court referral program, and in that program we have individuals that can, on their own initiative, they can choose whether or not they would like to complete a program to get credit off of their fines and their cost. There are normally 3 components of the program. We have adult ed, and through adult ed they can get workforce certificates, they can obtain a GED, a number of different trainings that are available through adult ed. They can also partake in counseling, and we work with the Guidance Center and also counseling associates, and then also just pure community service or a combination of the 3. We are working on trying to identify people before court that know that they need financial assistance. We're working to expound that now. We have recently printed out a number of brochures to make that information available. We also have a television within the courtroom, and then that shows information as far as what the program consists of. When people come up to the podium, once I call their name, a lot of times they'll ask, can I participate in a program to get credit off my fines and costs, because through word of mouth, they have learned that, they can do that.
Some who learn their lessons early, and you can help them get back on their feet again, and some that have to suffer years and years of prison time. But we can't build enough prisons for all these people that need to go at this point.
The drug use seems to be, with technology, there's become synthetics and different ways of delivering that, even after decades of fighting the supply side, which I think we need to continue to do, but it's so easy to get drugs now.
And you get drugs or you get alcohol, another drug, and act foolish and you kill someone, and then your problems are almost insurmountable. You're going to prison for a long time.
I think, Betty, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about is you may have someone that's not necessarily a predator, but is engaging in bad behavior for whatever reason. It could be a myriad of reasons, but many people are engaging in bad behavior, I think, to cope with trouble in their lives where they may have some misery. Things aren't working out for them like they wish. And then while you're using drugs or alcohol, you do dumb things. It's so difficult to help someone after they've done 4 years and 11 months on average in an Arkansas prison, and they don't have a driver's license, and they may not have job skills, and they're fighting an addiction, and they don't have an apartment. And that's a very difficult set of circumstances to help someone out of, and I think we should help. But if we can prevent someone from ever getting into that situation, then that would be good investments made.
Absolutely. You can't. I've tried to help fix a problem for one person who's incarcerated, and it is so challenging to try to help them. I can't imagine what it's like to, and yet you found systems in different towns and cities in Arkansas, groups of people who are willing to surround these people with the help they need.
When those systems of help are in place, people begin to realize help comes in ways they didn't expect, such as a judge or a police officer. Sergeant Jason McGlunn of the Social Police Department.
And I've run into, I think, 5 or 6 people in the last 4 or 5 months that I've previously arrested, and they've come up to me and said, hey, I know it was horrible at the time and you arrested me, took me to jail, but that got me started on that road to recovery. And it's something that I'd never really had before. I'd had like 1 or 2 people through my 9.5 years that had come up and said, hey, thank you for that. But I've had so many people the last 4 months that I'm like, wow, if we can do that and actually get them even more help to get that process started before they have to get through all that. That's what really impacted me. But seeing where they were at the time of the arrest and where they're at now, and just saying, hey, I had a tiny little portion of that, it's been real uplifting for it. So.
You know, one of my favorite things is to find someone who's led a life kind of on the other side of the law. So they're a client of ours, and we introduce them to law enforcement and the judges and other people willing to help them. And invariably, every one of them will go, especially when they're talking to law enforcement or someone like you, a judge, they're like, I always thought y'all were against me.
That's exactly what the woman in prison, the first time I taught this Bible study in prison at Wrightsville, said, what are you doing here? You're a judge. You're not supposed to be down here. I don't trust you. And things have changed. These are good people who've made mistakes and they're paying for them, and some paying dearly. And we can help these people that have remorse, work at rehabilitation, personal and professional jobs, or plumbers, electricians, truck drivers.
We need a bunch of truck drivers. It only takes a month.
This woman in prison, it appears will qualify for a 309 program. She's a good cook now at McPherson, and she has a job for her when she gets out. It's good news. I think that 75 to 90% of the people can be rehabilitated, and there's a better chance as you get them earlier and earlier, and not having a system that just punishes.
I couldn't agree with you more, especially in the progression. Just in 17 years of kind of doing this and trying to help people, I've run into a few folks that, truly, to my soul, scared me. But most people, what I've seen is a progression of a descent into chaos and crises. And if we could have intervened, they may not have taken it here. But they may have here. There was enough pain and opportunity, or we approached right. But that's one of the things that, before I breathe my last, I'd love to be able to see in Arkansas is there's, that we move far enough upstream that we prevent a lot of the downstream things from folks that are just in awful situations and are doing bad things.
This is paying it forward. This is what you do. But you're right. Upstream, if we can deal with it there, that's what we want to do.
What I have seen, in Arkansas over 17 years is a move for more options. I've had many law enforcement officers and judges tell us as we've been doing the Restore Hope programs, helping communities start 100 families, say, law enforcement officers and government caseworkers, whether they be child welfare or probation and then parole officers, they all have a certain amount of discretion. But the officers I talk to say, we've never had options.
No, and I'm sure they're happy with these diversion techniques because they are so limited.
And judges, like a district court judge, you have two tools. You have, you can find someone and put her in jail. And those are the two tools you have to get behavior to change or compliance with the law or to pay for crimes committed.
White County Sheriff Philip Miller.
Bad people need to be in jail where bad people belong. People that have never learned any different, that have never seen any different, that want to do good, they don't need to be in my jail. people that are really suffering with mental health issues, that this is a convenient place for them to get dropped. They don't need to be in my jail. You know, they need the resources like what's being provided. And that's what I see different. It's not, I'm soft on crime. It's not, oh, you know, no. The bad people need to be in jail and stay there. But folks that are suffering from things like this, from just social ills that they've never seen a different way, they don't need to be here.
And so if we can bring these community diversion, these options to the judges, then what we have seen is both law enforcement and judges are very, very pleased. And they start taking those, they even start innovating around them. It gives them the ability to do what they want to do anyway as a judge, which is to make their community better. What we really ultimately would love to do is to be able to get enough options to law enforcement and judges, you know, in the next 10 years that we're not looking in 10 to 15 years building another prison.
Yeah, or sooner than that.
If you could make some changes, have you thought about the types of things that you would like to see?
Well, the diversion at the district level, you know, to have the facilities and the personnel to divert alcohol and drug users. You know, you talk about suspended license and things like that, to have a volunteer system that will do what you were mentioning about calling and saying you have a court appearance on this date, you know, just a automatic notification. Those are simple things, but those are much easier than paying millions and millions of dollars for prison bed space.
Failure to appeal charges led Richard Chambers to build up considerable fines, but also put him on the radar of a case manager in the White County 100 Families Alliance.
My first appearance meeting with 100 Families was actually in the courtroom. Whenever I was having a hard time paying fines, he was about to issue jail time, but he asked me if I wanted to meet with this new group that he heard about that was in the courtroom called 100 Families. I went over there and met with them, and they actually started helping me at that point to pretty much reform my entire life from where I was at to where I should have been.
What did they say that made you want to talk with them?
Pretty much whenever the judge asked if there was asked if I had children under 18 living in the house, which I did, so he sent me over to them, and they pretty much told me that they could work with me to keep me out of jail, and that was the first step, was getting all my warrants taken care of and staying out of jail. So they offered the assistance, and I had nowhere else to turn but jail, so I reluctantly actually asked for help.
So how did you come to court? I guess you had a FTA.
Did
you get pulled over and go, or just?
I had several FTAs. It started out with no insurance, was the very first thing. And then it started going from there to failure to appears. Then I got caught driving again without it, because once you get a failure to appear, you don't have a license, they suspend it. So I got caught with driving a license and no insurance. So it started there and just started racking up until now where I'm at.
And where is that?
Currently, I could do 800 hours of community service, which would keep me busy for a while, but it's just under $6,000.
And how much was the original ticket and the insurance?
The original no insurance was like $250, but that's been years of ongoing to where I had nobody help me, nobody offer any assistance until I met with 100 Families. One of the things 100 Families works with is if it's difficult for you to do something, they try and find a way for you to be able to accomplish it. They try and keep with it so that way you can get things done in a step forward versus just feeling hopeless like you can't do it.
Jamie did kind of the intake and started helping you get access to help. Who did you get connected to?
Whenever I met with Jamie, they were first off just trying to survive, just trying to get me from where I was to the very next day. So the first thing they did was help me get established with some food, where the local food banks were, help me apply for food stamps, double check my kids' insurance, help with all the paperwork that's difficult for somebody like me that has ADHD or has other issues they're dealing with to process. She just sat me down and asked me the questions and helped submit the paperwork where it needed to go. I got off of opiates. I was on prescription medicated opiates and didn't realize I was actually hooked on them. I thought it was just normal process. And I went through a very, very hard detox where I just shut everything down and just lived in my house and detoxed solo, which Jamie pulled me out of. She actually was like, look, you need this assistance. You can do it, but you're doing it the hard way. So she connected me with, there was a Celebrate Recovery, and that's where 100 Families really steps in and goes, hey, this person legitimately needs our help. It's not just going in to get whatever they want.
How much time you got?
As of right now, a lot. I couldn't even give a number. I've already probably put in 600 hours, and I've got another 800 to do. But it actually feels like a community service, so I'd rather do that than have to be in jail, by far.
So thanks for joining us for this episode of Smart Justice, where we talked about the opportunities in district courts, upstream from incarceration and foster care, and join us next episode when we dive into the courts.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Smart Justice. Join us next week when we speak with judges about how a courtroom can be the place to change the course of life. See you then.
Thanks to our guests, former Chief Justice Betty Dickey, Judge Charles Baker, Judge Wendy Sheeran, Judge Sarah Kapp, Sergeant Jason McGlawn, Sheriff Philip Miller, and Richard Chambliss. Special thanks to Arkansas Churches for Life for sponsoring. Musical credits include Tangles by Aaron Sprinkle, Wander by ILO, and Believe in Me by Moments. Music is licensed through Soundstripe.com. The Babies in the Water parable is adapted from a story attributed to various creators, including Saul Alinsky and Irving Zola. Smart Justice is a work of Restore Hope. Please consider helping us produce more work like this by becoming a sponsor at www.smartjustice.org. Thank you again.